Well, yes, welcome everyone to Geohug. So before we kick off today's session, I'd just like to take this time to acknowledge the traditional lands which we're all coming from today. I'm here on the beautiful lands of the Gadigal, of the people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. So I'm so excited to have Rebecca Prain with us today. So Rebecca began her career in the gold mines of WA after graduating from the University of Otago, New Zealand in 1989. She's the Managing Director of Cube Consulting and is a non-executive director with Silver Lake Resources. So she's been a passionate advocate for women in the industry and a mentor for the next generation of geologists through the WIMWA mentoring program. And I feel so privileged that she's joined us today to chat about from obscurity to visibility, avoiding infamy. So it's going to be a great session. I hope you all enjoy it. Please use the chat and we'll be opening up the floor at the end. And yes, thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining. It's wonderful having you.
Okay, so thanks very much to Geohug for the opportunity. As Jess said, my name is Rebecca Prain and I'm a geologist and the Managing Director of Cube Consulting in Western Australia. Look, I have to confess that I didn't actually understand what Geohug was when I first heard about it and got volunteered to do this. So I had to go and do some research. And what I realized really quickly was that the majority of these talks are really technical, and I don't actually have anything really technical to talk about. So apologies to those who might want some rocks and data. I didn't know we were actually going to get a magician first, so that was definitely an added highlight. I also want to put something else out there straight away. And, I'm going to cover a number of concepts, but look, I'm not an original thinker in this space or a researcher. And I'm not a radical by any means. I'm just a geologist who's been trying to do interesting things that aren't all rock related, perhaps more business related, in an industry, the mining industry, that I absolutely love and am passionate about. What I'm going to talk about is my experience building a career in mining over the last 33 years and things that I have been involved in to try and improve the experience for other young women, or young people really, but predominantly young women based on the experiences that I had. My career is not unique. I imagine probably any number of you could give this kind of talk. I did get a prize for championing the cause of women. So I guess that gives me a little bit of street cred, and I'll talk about that a bit later. One thing that I do want to say is that the case for diversity has been made time and time again with people with, far more even grey hair, authority than me. And I'm not actually going to make the case for diversity. I actually would like to refer you to a previous Geohug, which was titled, "Is Gender Diversity in Geoscience Really a Problem?" We're probably talking a bit more about mining in general here. And some of the statistics that were in that presentation at the start by Caroline Tiddy were quite revealing. So look, I'm here to take you through my journey and then talk about some of the findings around gender differences in relation to experiences that I've had. So here's the bit that looked like perhaps I am a bit of a stripper. This was when I was a third-year student, or fourth-year student actually, and I don't think that they do field trips where they allow people to walk around in their bras. Look, not only am I a geologist, but I'm a Kiwi, and I have been in the mining industry since I was 21 years old. I've worked on mine sites, both FIFO and residential. And when I arrived in Australia, I knew nothing about mining. I knew no one, and I had no idea what I was in for. I'd been, as you can see, crossing rivers in New Zealand, climbing mountains, changing tyres. So I thought that I had a few skills for the Australian outback and didn't quite know how different it might be. Luckily, I'd also spent quite a bit of time on a high country farm, a sheep station in New Zealand, living in the single men's quarters with the shepherds, and I had experienced a male-dominated environment and had very positive experience there as well. And I think, having had that, it did stand me in good stead in the Murchison in 1989. I arrived in all fresh-faced with a shirt on this time, and I set about learning about mining. And, my first job, I had to catch a bus from Perth. And just as I'd looked out of the window on my first bus trip to Kew, wondering where Australia kept all the sheep, I also looked around the mine and I wondered where the women were. Often came across a couple of truck drivers, a female driller at my first job, women in the lab, but no professionals in the mine. We'll probably all recognise this. I muddled through the early years of my career. I actually drove trucks for a year. I got jack of being a geologist after a year and a half, and I went back and worked as a contract mine geologist at a couple of mines. And my last operational role was at the super pit at KCGM in Kalgoorlie. I've done stupid things like driven off mine sites with the first driller who'd give me a lift to get the hell away from there. Possibly because I didn't have a lot of older people that took any particular interest in me or my career. It was totally sink or swim. And being a contract mine geologist in the early 90s was do or die on steroids. You'd arrive on site, you'd be flying in, senior geo would fly out, and you'd have to work out the systems, the people, the geography, and the geology within about a day. Not to mention having calls that the digger was down and needed an ore markup. I actually would like to think that we're not still doing that to young mine geologists, but I have a feeling that it's not completely erased. And for a long time, I actually didn't think about the gender issue, particularly given where I'd come from. I was mostly picked on for being a New Zealander. In the FIFO world of the late 80s and 90s, not only didn't we didn't have high vis, I actually barely met a university educated woman at work until I moved to Kalgoorlie. And there were no visible women ahead of us. And it actually surprised me and still surprises me now because I don't consider that I was a pioneer. I know that there were older women there now, but I didn't at the time. And I didn't see them and I didn't know them. I had been brought up with strong female role models and to believe that I was equal and that all options were open to me and that women were as capable of leadership as well as being great individual contributors. However, where was I going with this career? And I don't know if that was just being a female or if it was just being a mine geologist. There were some alarm bells though, and they really started ringing whenever I talked about my options. What could I aspire to in an operational environment? How do women manage having children and staying in mining? And my colleagues were men in the most part, and they simply didn't have those thoughts because the majority of them had either a wife or girlfriend at home, and they weren't grappling with those same issues. Look, I had some fantastic male bosses. I had a great one in Kalgoorlie. He gave me opportunities and supported me when I did a stretch project and I had to present to a rather intimidating mining manager. Unfortunately, though, he left after about a year, and then it was sort of back to that obscurity feeling that we all know what that feeling is. I would like to point out here, though, that I've always felt really safe, included, heard, and equal in a group of geologists. I really do want to make that very clear. But the mining industry is obviously made up of a lot more than just geologists. So in 1994, which seems quite a long time ago now, I just couldn't see how I could progress in an operational career. I had a real wake-up call when I celebrated a colleague's 40th birthday. And she was doing the same job as me, and I was 27. And I was determined that I wasn't going to be logging chips and doing ore markouts at 40. So I started thinking about what my options were. I really wanted to meet someone. I wanted to have children. And everybody at my age in Kalgoorlie was already paired up. And I was spending my life only doing three things, working a lot, up to 80-hour weeks, playing indoor netball, and then going out for Thai food in Kalgoorlie. That's all that there was. So against the advice of the people that I worked with, I joined Serpac Software in 1995, and that was like a complete change of pace and environment for me. I was pretty fresh off a mine site and I wasn't very polished. I had a very supportive CEO, he was actually the founder of Serpac, and he recognised my potential, though, I think, as a communicator. The best thing that he did, though, was to get me one-on-one training in communication skills. And, this training has been beneficial to me throughout my entire career. And it's served to hone my direct style to ensure I'm clear and understood. And, I had to go from a mine site where I might have been swearing and acting tough to, that was a bit of a survival routine, to trying to calm and charm someone who was anxious on a Serpac help desk, and they were in the production environment that I'd been in. Serpac was also a male-dominated environment. We had programmers as well as all the, commercial people, marketing and things. but definitely still male dominated. Over my time with Serpac, which then changed, it got taken over by Gemcom, I had 2 maternity leaves and I produced 3 beautiful children. Yes, one of the pregnancy was 2 children. So I survived marriage, breastfeeding, postnatal depression, and managing childcare whilst working full time and traveling to mine sites around the world. When my first child was 5 months old, I was desperate to return to work. But this was a private enterprise at that time, and they didn't have sound maternity leave policies. I'm mentioning this obviously because it affects working women. I was told, I suppose it's okay for you to come back to work, but it's not really fair on men when women take maternity leave and expect to come back into their old job. This was in 2003, so it's the old days for some of you, but I actually didn't expect that to happen at all. I was really quite shocked. I worked 17 years for this organisation. I had some really amazing experiences. There was a year in Canada, in the frozen north, where I worked in an oil sands mine for over a month. I went underground in the cage with French-speaking miners in Quebec who were clearly sledging me. And I worked out how to drive on the wrong side of the road in minus 25 degrees in snow within about 4 days of arriving in Canada for the first time. So I travelled to mines in every state of Australia, as well as the Canada and Indonesia and Malaysia. There were times that I regretted leaving operations when I did this, but the breadth of experience that I got in this role, it sort of felt, I'm certainly not diminishing people that have done an MBA, but it certainly felt like an MBA in practice. This whole career that I actually really loved, it all came to a screeching halt once a French company took over, and I could just see that there was nowhere for me to go. There was a book of job codes, and I couldn't see like my breadth of experience fitted into that. And I just felt that I wasn't really valued. So I needed to find someone who wanted a geologist with commercial experience. So I joined Cube Consulting, my current employer, in 2013 as operations manager. And it was a bit awkward at first because my role was ill-defined and there had been significant change in the company prior to me getting there, with various groups left wondering about how it all fit together, the business. I'd done a lot of mining in my last few jobs, but I had to learn a whole lot more about resource geology rather than just mining, including, I consider I absorbed geostatistics through the skin, but I certainly can barely say geostatistics, let alone do it. I listened very carefully and I reviewed a large number of very technical reports. So I've got a pretty good working knowledge of what people do. I work here at Cube. I work with a team of geologists and mining engineers, and they're highly experienced experts at what they do, and I'm really proud to represent them. I'm the managing director, and my job is to do everything to lead and support the team. So, finance, HR, marketing, business development, business administration. This pulls together all the threads of my career, but I couldn't do it without having an established network in the industry and the support of the chairman, who's just amazing. And I couldn't have got that network without an amount of time on the ground, kicking rocks, swallowing flies, helping people on site using their technical software. This picture here is me at the Kambalda Geology Symposium, which is an event that we run every year, attracting speakers from mine sites and exploration projects within a large radius of Kalgoorlie-Kambalda in Western Australia. This event is an opportunity for young geologists, and look, sometimes we do get the older ones who just want to, tell war stories, and they can get some speaking experience in front of a very friendly crowd, kind of like this, but it's a live crowd. In recent years, we've attracted up to 120 people to the symposium, and it's run by Cube and a couple of other sponsors. One's Expedio and one is AMPS, as a free event. It's to educate, increase skills, and it's also a networking opportunity for the geologists. Since the big companies don't tend to do those geology meetings as much, I think they've sort of started again now, but they hadn't been doing them. We also run an engineering event with AMPS, that's Advanced Mine Production Systems, and they do it the day before the geology one. So the importance of your tribe, when you're young and you're starting out, the mining industry can seem a harsh place. It didn't, in a way it did, and it didn't to me in the 80s. The first thing I got told was that I wouldn't last the summer. and what do you know, Kiwi, and bloody geos was a constant refrain that I think we've all heard. I was only 21 years old, and not only was I naive to the mining industry, I was also developing life skills a long way away from my family and my friends. On any mine site, and in mining company, there are silos, there are professional rivalries, politics, and you're compounded by isolation and harsh climate, particularly up at Wiluna. When you've had a bad day at work, you have to go and eat in a mess with your workmates, you have to socialise with them, maybe share a bathroom, laundry. Unfortunately, I believe the silos still exists and cliques are present everywhere that there are humans. And the key to beating that is to find your own tribe, and it's not necessarily the one that you think it might be. It wasn't all grim at first. I actually loved it. Being a geologist, I love a field trip and an opportunity to get out and about and see what's going on. Going to work in the mine site, you're part of an efficient operation. You can see, you're in the bush, you can see some awesome sunsets. I've had opportunity to buy nuggets of gold from prospectors, and obviously play a lot of pool when you're in the wet mess as well. It's my birthday coming up next week, and all I want to do is play pool, but unfortunately I don't have those kind of friends anymore. It's so important for one's sense of self-worth and belonging to create relationships and become part of a community, especially as a young woman in a male-dominated environment. In turn, when you're part of a community, the support that you get from that community and that you give is a vital ingredient in happiness and resilience, I think. As you can see, I have a number of tribes, and Geohug is a community that I've just been introduced to, and it's interesting, even being able to see a magician. The internet makes it so much easier for us to find like-minded and interesting people. No woman is an island, and it's through positive relationships, both working and mining community related, that I am in the position that I am today. As Jess mentioned, I've been a non-executive director for a year, and that's put me back on a steep learning curve. A publicly listed company. I've just completed the AICD company directors course, which was the first time I've studied probably since the late 80s. And look, the way I got that role was I was recommended by a friend that I'd met through Women in Mining WA, and my profile was elevated thanks to the West Australian Chamber of Minerals and Energy and the Women in Resources Awards. And also, obviously, I survived a number of interviews to get the job. Speaking of the Chamber of Minerals and Energies, at the end of 2020, it does actually make me uncomfortable to talk about these things, but I sort of feel like I need to, because I was lucky enough to be honoured. I was nominated by a number of my former mentees for the Women in Resources Champion Award, and to my absolute surprise, I won. I honestly, like I said, I haven't won something, I think, since a jar of jelly beans at school. I've been a mentor through Women in Mining WA since 2011, and I have now officially mentored 16 women plus others, and I'm about to meet the 17th tomorrow. One thing I wish I'd recognised, particularly through the years when I was striving and feeling like I was getting nowhere, was that you can be a leader even if you're not the boss, and you can be honing those skills even if you aren't seen. It does take courage to take the initiative, to put your hand up, be involved in problem solving. And I have heard it from a number of the young women, is that they don't want to say anything because they don't want to step over the line, speak out of turn, draw attention. There are numerous excuses for not speaking up, but leadership starts long before you get a title or a role. In my experience, passion and perseverance will take you a long way. And all those women in that picture there have all demonstrated that. We all have periods of languishing, particularly during the pandemic that we've just been through, or we're still in actually. A career isn't a constant path of successes and upward mobility, and particularly if you have to stop along the way to have children. It is a bit of a cliche, but once you find what you love and you stick at it, and you find a team of people that you really enjoy being with at work and in your personal life, it's worth sticking with them. Another way of putting that is like for the biologists amongst us, nothing happens it's like punctuated evolution, I guess. Nothing happens for a long time, and then suddenly there can be major changes. And I certainly had major changes last year. You do need some passion for some aspect of your job to ensure you're not sitting there working out what you get paid for every minute at work. And I certainly have someone told me that they did that, and I was horrified. Perseverance can be accepting the disappointments and carrying on anyway, knowing that things can and will change. It is sometimes necessary to throw in the towel, and you do know when your mental health is suffering. And at the moment, particularly in Western Australia, there's opportunity galore. I think the unemployment rate is just about an all-time low. Same thing happens in your personal life as well. I separated from my husband in 2017, and that was an incredibly painful and distressing experience. But some really good things have happened for me out of that, and I've created a great new house and a garden for my children and for my animals as well. Avoiding infamy, I said that when Jess asked me for a title. I was trying to think of something funny, and I thought that was pretty funny, but it did get me reflecting what I mean by that. And I think what I really mean is it's about your reputation, because that's actually all you've got. There are plenty of traps along the way for young people starting out in mining, and whilst my first time in a mining camp was more than 30 years ago, I suspect there are still some lessons are given to women that are new on site. And I've seen evidence of that in things in the press lately. There are so many rules that you're learning every time you go to a new site, and then you're also trying to do a good job. You're trying to be safe. You might be subject to commentary about your figure. I know I certainly was. Your makeup, if you wear it too much, too little, your choice of sexual partner, and even your clothing. We're putting the onus on women to improve their position in the system as it exists, and I can tell you that it's actually exhausting. One point that I would like to make clearly is that it's not just in mining. Mining just happens to have some additional pressures for everyone, and being in a camp is a small microcosm of society at large. Many of us senior women have stories that are not our own to tell from younger women who have confided in us. The anxiety that goes with being a minority can create safety issues that are all of our responsibility. Look, one of my personal bugbears, and my chairman, who I love, he came up with this one yesterday as well. And it's a topic that comes up time and time again when the appointment of women, actually it's when the appointment of women or any other minority is concerned, it's the merit, the issue of merit. And this comes from both women and men. And as we know, women only want to be appointed on merit, and male leaders are at pain to say a woman was appointed on merit, but it's still raised all the time. We need to educate ourselves about this. We need to consider merit and understand that it is a purely subjective construct. And there are plenty of articles you can read about it. And that talk that I've got there is the first link by Professor Bob Wood is really good, and it sort of encapsulates it in a nutshell. From that, there are two immediate problems with the merit argument. Firstly, everyone must have equal access to acquiring whatever quality is defined as merit, the so-called level playing field. Secondly, for any job, people must be assessed only on criteria that predict performance. Given that up until the mid-80s in Australia, a woman wasn't allowed in an underground mine, how could a woman have attained, or how could a woman even attain the experience that equates to merit in becoming a CEO? The criteria that predict performance are difficult to quantify and assess. So notions of merit are often defined and measured inaccurately. And the nature of work is rapidly evolving, as we know. The way we lead young people today is very different to the way we led young people in the 70s and 80s, and it requires a different set of skills, i.e. different criteria. Outside of the majors, the mining industry is a small pool, and people choose to work with the people that they've either worked with before or who they know can deliver, and understandably so. It has been a struggle to date for aspirational and competent women to get onto that list. Yes, things are changing, but the pace of change has not been nearly as rapid as many of us had expected. So all I'd ask you to do is just research some of the things around merit. And then there's another bind as well that gets us, which is the difference between confidence and competence. As humans, we conflate the two. We think if we see someone that's incredibly confident, therefore they are competent. But in fact, the research says that is actually not true. I don't like that title, why do so many incompetent? I don't like that. It was written by a man, and it is a bit old, but it's very good about this confidence versus competence. And also it talks about how people aren't actually that good at judging who is competent. And you will know that yourself. You would have seen that. If you get a tradie round, you want to try and really understand who would do a great job or who's just confident, a bit of a shyster. And it at that level. It also applies at a leadership level as well. And by associating leadership qualities with confidence, we're overlooking quieter but perhaps more competent leaders. It also ties back to the merit myth, whereby we're assuming people are being assessed for jobs on criteria that predict performance, and the research is telling us that's not the case. This one's topical. The argument has been made that with quotas to increase the representation of women, there's now the danger of incompetent women being promoted beyond their ability. Look, I'd actually love someone to show me a large cohort of incompetent women in charge. I just don't think that would happen. And I also, because the women I know, are highly competent and they're deserving of their positions. As I say this, I get nervous talking about this because I'm really conscious of a backlash against the push for diversity in the industry. At the same time, though, as companies are promoting themselves as an employer of choice, and I'm afraid we just have to push through this. But once again, for people like me, it's actually exhausting. It's exhausting for the people that are speaking out, and they fear the backlash that comes from speaking out. And you can see this whenever somebody puts a post about the lack of diversity in mining. There's a mixed bag of responses on platforms such as LinkedIn. There's people that want to be provocateurs and say something that's, just diminishing the conversation. They say that, you shouldn't read the comments, but I thought we were, past simply seeing both sides of a supposed moral dilemma, which is simply the desire for equality from people. Everybody wants to be treated equally. We all do. Your children will, you will, the animals want to be treated equally. But our judgment around who are equals is flawed, and equality still isn't happening if you look at the data around female participation in mining. And when you're part of a dominant group, any dominant group, you are invested in maintaining your advantage. We all do it. We want to be the haves and not the have-nots. We're all human. During COVID, we all scrambled for advantage, or toilet paper. You only need to see the empty shelves to see human nature in action when we were in Western Australia, at least, in no danger of true shortages, yet people were clamouring for advantage. The second reference there, imposter syndrome. This is something that a lot of women stand up and say, I feel like an imposter. There's some great things in that particular article. Imposter syndrome is defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. And it disproportionately affects high achieving people who find it difficult to accept their accomplishments, particularly women. So even when high achieving women do succeed and they might feel a bit uncomfortable in a new environment, this becomes, I can't even say this word properly, pathologized as being an imposter. And if you're able to find role models that like you and you're able to be like patted back into shape, then these feelings can dissipate. Well, that's more likely to happen to a young man who's promoted into a role. I sort of touched on this, but there are actually penalties for women in being competent and taking charge. So for years, we've been told to lean in, be confident, take charge. Yet when we do this, there are negative consequences, and there's some good information about that in the reference that I've got there. I have experienced this many, many times. I've heard plenty of criticism for women who have spoken up about inequity. And the most egregious of these charges is that somehow speaking up about this research, or even saying that there's inequity, is that that you're man bashing or man hating, which I just find that absolutely abhorrent. I've worked with such a large number of men across my many years in the industry, and I have to say I love nothing more than a highly competent take charge man. I love working with men. I've always wanted to be part of the team. I don't care if I was the only woman. I want to be part of the team, but many times I've felt unseen or even marginalized just because I'm different. The truth of the matter is that the system, and it's not just in mining, has not adapted fast enough to the large number of educated women seeking to take an equal role in the workforce in Australia. And that was something that surprised me coming from New Zealand, which has always been a bit more progressive around matters of gender. Elizabeth Gaines from FMG got up at Diggers and Dealers and she said change has been hard fought and slow, and the equal representation that we all hoped we would have achieved by now has not eventuated. So there's a senior leader saying that she's still aware of that. I was at Diggers and Dealers in Kalgoorlie a couple of weeks ago, and look, there were an awful lot more pictures of women in corporate presentations. But still, when I'm listening, I can hear it's the men being amplified for discovering X number of deposits, responsible for building X mines and being part of experienced teams building shareholder value, because women haven't had the opportunity, or this inequity hasn't worked its way through the system. So, look, I do conclude that the gender diversity in geoscience and mining is still an issue, and that the dial hasn't moved far enough. The fact that you're here at my talk makes me think that you might be willing to be part of the solution. And I do think it's inequality from the past working through the system. It's dated stereotypes such as women are carers and men are workers, and a lack of understanding about the things that I've just mentioned previously, the merit, confidence versus competence being at the top of the list. I actually hate being drawn on this and talking about it, but I thought that I would be disingenuous if I didn't mention, the evidence is overwhelming that women are still being subjected to sexual harassment in the workplace. It was reported yesterday, I saw it, that mining giant BHP had apologised to staff after self-reporting 103 cases of substantiated sexual harassment within its offices, mine sites and accommodation villages in the 2021 financial year. It happens, it's real, and we need men and women to speak up when they see things that aren't right. The everyday sexism, the inappropriate joker who pushes it too far. It is not man-bashing to refer to these reports. It's not sensationalising the issue. I read a comment on a post about the BHP News. The people that really suffer through this behaviour are not the ones who can afford the consequences of taking a stand. I can. I'm a middle-aged, well-respected woman. I could take a stand on something, but the people that are really suffering can't. There is a pyramid of sexual violence that begins with boys will be boys, body shaming, and banter. Had all of those. It moves through non-consensual photography and unwanted touch, through to catcalls and victim blaming. That's even before we get to physical violence against women. It's real, and there is no reward for women who speak up about their experiences. And I'll make a confession, I haven't always followed my own advice. Probably I wasn't as aware. I have been complicit in the past, and I've laughed at sexist jokes in an effort to fit in, and I'm really not very proud of that. I don't want to be a killjoy. I don't want to have no sense of humour. I don't want to be ostracised for standing up to one of the boys. I want to be part of the team. However, on this issue, enough is enough, and we've all got to stand up for ourselves, and we've got to call out bad behaviour when we see it. It is exceedingly brave of women to speak up when confronted with sexual harassment. There was a recent case in WA that made the front page, and people are still asking me if somehow that person was looking for trouble. It's not about women's clothes. It's not about her false eyelashes. It's not about her makeup. It is about respect. Yeah, that's all the heavy stuff now, thank God. I really don't like talking about that. So, what can we do as professionals, as individuals? What are the messages? I don't know the answers. As I said, I'm not a professional in this space. I'm just got lived experience, but I've been challenging my own thinking about things like quotas, merit, ideas of competence. One thing that I thought of was like to consider the mythology and the stories that you tell. We're all storytellers at heart, particularly in geology. Just be aware of the stories. Oh, good on John, he did all this, he did all that. There are some fabulous women that have done some great stuff about you, but perhaps they need a bit of amplification. I ask you to cherish those around you who are brave, because there is a cost to speaking up. And then moving forward, I just think being generous with your time for younger people, both men and women, as they learn the ropes in our industry is really important. I can still remember my first week in a mine, and I was just a contract sampler, And there was a geologist who took the time to explain the process to me, from exploration sampling through to grade control drilling. Like, let all of us be that geologist. And when they talk about things to keep women in the workforce, just remember that everybody benefits from these, from flexible work, from parental leave, and the improvements in workplace culture as well that comes from diversity. We're nearly at the end now from my lecture. I would like to make a plug for mentoring. This has proven to be an important activity to support young women in the industry, but it's not the only answer. We certainly noted in the current, I did the training with a woman for Women in Mining WA with a woman called Megan McCracken. And we certainly noticed in the current intake of mentees to the Women in Mining WA program that questions of leadership were definitely more prevalent than they've been in the past. I'm just so proud to be part of a group that educates young women about leadership through working with established leaders. And we have a great mix of male and female mentors. It's not just about the mentoring, it's about the network. For up and coming technical professionals, we have tradeswomen and emerging leaders. This was the network that was lacking for those of us who were released into the mining industry in the 80s and 90s. I'm part of this, Women in Mining WA, but there are successful mentoring programs also run by the AIG, AusIMM, and there's other industry groups around, other women in mining groups around the country, and internationally as well, there are mentoring programs for geologists. Women don't just need mentors, we need sponsors. We need someone who looks out for us. I know I've had a couple of absolutely brilliant male sponsors, including my current chairman, and also I'd say the guy who founded SERPAC. They speak up for us. They make sure our qualities are seen and we're in the mix when promotions are being considered. I mentioned I had a boss in Kalgoorlie who did this. A small act by a senior person can go a long way, as I still remember that, 30 years later. Women such as myself when I was younger, and such as all the young women in the industry today, we need amplification in a world of stories, and it can be authentically and respectfully done by both men and other women. And we need role models for young women and men, something to aspire to be. And it's great to see that there are some well-recognised leaders now espousing the value of diversity and inclusion. I am absolutely focused on retaining women in the industry because I truly believe it's beneficial to all of us. It's, the companies, the shareholders, the employees, and to society at large. I really wish I'd had a mentor when I was making decisions about how to channel my aspirations and talents. Maybe I'd have stayed in operations longer. Maybe I'd have had the surety and courage to take some more chances. It does take a lot of energy proving yourself to be competent time and time again amongst a confident group. When we are privileged, we need to help lift others up, and mentoring is just a fun and practical way to do this. As I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I just want to say it one more time. When you speak up, particularly around gender diversity, there are plenty of people to knock you down, tell you that you're wrong, call you man basher, and they want to debate you. To me, there actually isn't a debate when it comes to equality. It's great to now know that there are some amazing male allies in our industry, and this number is growing all the time, really visible now. I'm speaking up because I feel I have a moral obligation to do so. I believe that we, men and women, need to continually challenge our thinking around why there are less women at all levels in the mining industry. When we identify that good operator, and we need to encourage her, give her a leg up, support her, recognizing that there may have been barriers to her getting where she got to. And helping out younger mining professionals with the benefit of a 30-year career is well within my reach, and I'm sure well within a number of your reach. I want to be in an industry and a society where I'm defined by what I can do rather than the school that I went to or the place I live or my accent. When you come into the industry from another state or country, and there are now plenty of people that are not born in Australia in the industry, you are by definition tribeless. In my experience, there was opportunity in this anonymity, but it made the journey to where I wanted to be that much harder. Finding a tribe, finding your people, it really gives you the courage to continue. plus having a dog. Dogs are really good. If I can help the young women that I mentor progress further in their careers, further than I went, into different avenues, negotiate around working conditions, find a new job and keep them in this industry, then I have succeeded. I'm absolutely passionate about geology, geomorphology, mining, the whole industry and its people, and the knowledge that we have accumulated and shared, and the can-do attitude that we have. We really have so much to be proud of, and we have so many exciting things to come as well. In Australia, we are really privileged to be remote from the rest of the world with a fantastic mineral endowment, so long may it last. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I would like to thank Jess again and to the Geohug sponsors. Thank you.